Hello, everyone. Welcome to our monthly Bluebeam webinar series. Our topic today is going to be just tips and tricks and just tools that you might use every day. Some of these you may know already, some content you may not know at all yet. Might be some new approach for using some tools. I'm not going to spend too much time on PowerPoint stuff. I got a handful of slides to go through, and we'll dive right into the software and show some of this content just live. Quick agenda on just the webinar today. Just a minute about myself, about US CAD, going through what I plan on sharing with everyone today, diving right into it, showing it, going through all the Q&A, and just some tips for you guys as well, just to start off within the environment here. There is a Q&A section that you can click on to ask questions. I'll try to keep that open and view that portion as well. And if I can, I'll answer those live on screen. And this whole process is being recorded, so you will get a link to this by the end of the week, maybe first part of next week. And all the questions that you've asked, if I didn't get a chance to respond to those, I'll still type up answers to all of that as well. And you get that inside of the email for everyone that's registered for the webinar as well. So my name is Ken Phelps with US CAD here. I'm the Bluebeam product specialist. I've been around in the industry for quite a while, helping with just design software dating back to early 90s with AutoCAD up through the current design products you got access to. And lately, the last probably 6 years now, almost going on 7 years, I've been focused strictly on Bluebeam Revu. This is all I get into, certified instructor and consultant on the software. If you got questions, by all means, ask inside of the Q&A panel that's inside of here. A little bit on US CAD. Also, they've been around for 20 plus years in the industry. One of the leading overall firms with AEC from an Autodesk perspective, as well as they are the largest reseller in the country, I think technically in the world, on Bluebeam Revu as well. Some of the services that US CAD provides is BIM consulting, help on projects and product, and just training on the various products as well. So you want to figure out how to use Civil 3D or Revit, Bluebeam, what have you. There's instructors we have here, consultants that can help you through all of that. And one of the pieces that I try to mention every time about this too is this bottom portion down here is about production and team augmentation, which is kind of a hot thing right now with trying to find the right staffing for jobs you got going on to build that, your base up with teams that can get into it. We can help support the effort as well. Some of the products that we support: Autodesk, of course, Bluebeam. There's also things like the Leica, Point Fuse, M Suite, Panzura, CAD Learning as well. So there's a whole laundry list of other software packages that we can help you bring to bear within your process and your workflow. Locations that we got across the country. You can see there's all kinds of offices we got tagged here, and various locations that aren't even listed as well. There's folks in Wisconsin, Michigan, Florida, Texas, and all those diverse locations as well. So my quick agenda I want to touch on, it's just a 10,000 foot view to all of it, but just ways that you can leverage some keyboard shortcuts, the control and the shift, ways to search for text inside of there. You got your basic search tools you can use, and those are great, but there might be some shortcuts we can do to make that process even faster. And just a little bit I want to touch on. These aren't really like the keyboard shortcuts or tips and tricks per se, but some of the lesser utilized tools and things that you may not be aware of. I want to touch on some of those as well, which help make the process of certain activities, certain steps that you're going through a little bit more efficient. So that's almost all I have for the PowerPoint. Hopefully it's quick and easy. I just want to dive right into the software and jump over here to Bluebeam Revu. So one of the first things I want to just mention as I get into some of the tips and tricks, before I even go too far in all this, a lot of the stuff I got for the keyboard shortcuts to access that, ways to gain access to various tools. On the help menu, you've got access to the keyboard shortcuts guide. So you have this right here and available. I try to touch on this every time I teach a class as well, so that you can have this list up. and you can interact with this. You can print out portions of it. I've seen folks that will copy those sections out of here and print them out and paste them by their monitor, what have you, kind of make their own little cheat sheet guide for it. But this is available to you. You have access to it. All these keyboard shortcuts that are here, just the default values of those, these are customizable. So if you want to use T for something besides text box, you can remap that to be a different function. On your review menu, about halfway down, there's the keyboard shortcuts option here. You can then go into that and find the tool you want to modify and change, and then remap that to a different keyboard shortcut. So I'll go grab just the one that's here for ARC. The default down here is Shift C. I can change that to whatever keyboard shortcut if I want to have that be mapped to whatever, A instead. It'll tell you if the keyboard shortcut that you have is already mapped to something else. You can choose to force it to reassign it if you want to, but you will be aware of this is mapped to arrow currently. You can reassign it so ARC is now A versus Shift C. I see a question that popped in here quick where the keyboard shortcuts guide was. The help menu. Towards the very bottom of the help menu, you'll find the keyboard shortcuts guide. Just a quick little tidbit for ways you can just understand more about the software. I've even learned somebody's reading through this going, oh, that's a quick way to access that tool, whatever it might be. You may even find some new tools that you weren't even aware of that were in here, just inside of this list. So some quick tips on just various tools that you may use. Again, some of these functions you may already know of already, but just to give you some awareness to the various tools that are inside of here. Simple ones like just the basic line command. So when you're drawing in the line, you want to have this to be horizontal. Just hold down Shift. We'll lock that in to be horizontal. Now with the line function, it's not just horizontal. With that tool, it's actually every increment here of 45 degrees. So I'm just moving my cursor around to have a different direction to it. It's locked down to every increment of 45. Now, one of the questions that does tend to come up with that is, can you change the angle? And not that I'm aware of, it's locked into 45. I'm not sure if it means we have to adjust that to say every 15 degrees to lock into those. As far as I know right now, it's every 45 degrees. Maybe some registry hack to change that to a different value. And that also follows through with other tools like highlights. So if I grab the highlight tool, just H for highlight is the quick shortcut. You can hold down Shift to have that highlight be nice and clean and straight. Now without it, you might try and do a highlight, and it's not terrible. Has a little wiggle to it, the wiggle worms you're drawing across the screen. Again, just Shift to make that horizontal. Also vertical too. Just hold Shift, and it depends on how you gesture with the mouse is the way it's going to highlight that. Now a different option also with the highlight tool, this can be a nice just quick tip as you're going through and working on the PDFs that you have, is to see what type of information is in the PDF. By that I mean, does the PDF contain text or not? Is it scanned information? So a lot of that content will come down to here. You'll see the actual cursor with the highlight tool active. You see it change that little vertical line, that little pipe symbol. This lets you understand that you have text there in that location. It's not just line works or some rasterized image that looks like a font. It's searchable, usable text. So that may come into play as searching tools inside of here. If you want to use the page labeling step inside of this, you want to make sure it's going to be text, so you can leverage those functions on the PDF and query that content you have inside of it. So if you have text, it does this. Now that can sometimes be a potentially frustrating thing. So I'm trying to highlight, maybe it's a certain line I want to highlight, and I just can't do it because there's text there. So if I'm trying to highlight this line here, I can't do that because it sees the nearby text, which is now interrupting my option to highlight just the line the way that I want it to. I can turn off the option to query for the text by simply holding down Control. That's going to ignore the text inside of the file. So now I can highlight that line however I see fit, and it doesn't force it to go on to the text. And you can also piggyback that with the shift as well. So the control will ignore the text, and the shift will make it horizontal. So if I hold down both of those, I can highlight that line however I need to leverage that inside of the current need that I have in the plane. So in a lot of these, you can use more than one keyboard shortcut to get to the right end result that you're after. Other tools inside of here, like the call out, pretty straightforward. You may have used this 1,000 times. Adding in additional arrows. I want more than one leader off of this. You can do the kind of standard method of right-clicking, choose add leader, and point to where the new one's supposed to go. But a faster means of doing that is with shift. So if you hold down shift, you go near this little kind of corner point, that transition to have. If you hold down shift, it may be hard to see on screen, but it's a little plus in the lower right-hand corner of the arrow I have in my cursor. That's a plus just means if I pick there, it's going to add in an additional leader off of the callout. So shift, pick. You can then let go of the shift at that point, and I can drop that arrow in however it needs to be placed onto my file. So if you want to have one note with arrows pointing across to multiple different destinations to it, you can drop those in. But do keep in mind that even though I did pick here, right, so I chose that corner point to base the initial addition of the arrow from, if I drag it to some different location, it'll come off of that nearest side. It could be above, it could be below, right, left. So it does depend on the orientation that you place the arrow in on how it's going to be attached. So it may not just default back to here because you chose to start there, but it may show there initially. Just depends on the nearest placement to attach to. And the same thing to go through and get rid of them. Maybe you dropped in 2 or 3 additional leaders and realized that, I really didn't want to have the extra one pointing to this overall destination. If you pick at the arrowhead itself, that little control point that's right here, if you shift and pick on it, it may be tough to see on screen, but there's a little minus sign by the arrowhead now that's going to subtract that leader out. So depending on where you choose to either add or remove, just shift will make that process a lot more efficient. It's faster than doing the right click, go to the menu, find the one you want, click it to add or delete. Another common function I get into, especially when I'm teaching a class, is anytime that you're choosing multiple points for one of your tools. This could be with the cloud tool, a polygon, a polyline, the area command, all those tools where you choose multiple points to define some kind of a shape or a path for it to use. That selection, you can choose to undo the points that you just selected. So then by that, I mean, if I go into, I'm just going to grab my polyline tool here, for example. As you're choosing your points, I realized that maybe I messed up and I really didn't want to have that corner here selected. You're not forced to scrap the entire tool and start over again. You just hit backspace. And it will undo the last point that you just had selected. Again, this is for any one of those tools that has multiple points that help define it. A certain path like polyline or the perimeter shape being drawn in by a polygon or area. Just hit backspace. It'll remove those last points. And you can go all the way back to where you first started the tools. Click your way through. Go, oh, darn it, not that one. Go back, 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 and then choose the path that you actually wanted instead. Put all the path along that. Now, similar approach too, like what I just did with the adding leaders into the callout. You may have missed some points as you're defining the path. This was supposed to come in, then out this way versus straight up. So along this edge here, I want to introduce another control point so I can then manipulate the path being used for that profile being drawn in here. And one of the ways is the standard right click method. You can right click, put a control point, and choose add control point. And I have a new control point in here. I can then manipulate and reposition the path that polyline should take. A faster means of doing that is with our friend shift that we've used a half dozen times already. Just shift, pick, and wherever you pick at, you see a new control point then shows up there. And then manipulate that path however I need to adjust that control point location. And left click and drag to change where that path is supposed to go to. The exact same approach to subtract a point out. So if you're trying to trace out some contour, some space, a building, what have you, and like, oh, well, I went around this column in the corner and I could have just bypassed that entirely. You just shift and pick on the same point that will then subtract that out. You just want to shift and pick on an existing control point to remove it from the overall definition of that path of that object. Also going through this, I can take one of these, and this is available on any one of these multi-sided tools. It's going to be the area, polygon, whatnot. It works for all those. I can right click on this segment that's here and just convert that to an arc. Now for this particular step, there's not a keyboard shortcut for that to convert this one line. But what it shows up now is I have two little handles on that. So one on this end, it's a little short one down here, but one down here as well. These are my control arms, so to speak, for the path of that arc being drawn on the right side now of my path. Think of these kind of like rubber bands. The more I pull, the longer that gets, the more I pull the curve in that direction. And then the angle that this line takes on is how that path of that arc starts. So if I want to go down further, I can come this way, scoot that back in that way, so it comes in and makes this kind of S shape. It is up to you for how you want to manage the curvature being drawn in to that path there. So if I have to match some weird curving gutter path to go around, or a roundabout, trying to go through and trace appropriately, that might be a means to go if you have that curve map that design a bit more closely. And this can be done also on measurement tools. So if you have like a poly length, and you have some entire length of some curving gutter being used, there's curves and twists and turns inside of that. You can map that path and get the overall list of the linear distance of that, even around the curve. Now, a different option for this too is to generate a curve that goes between 3 points. So the one down here is just between two, taking a straight line segment and converting that one segment into an arc. Okay, for example, the one here, I kind of have this little zigzag shape. I can make an arc that starts here, passes through this point, it's kind of being the apex of that curve, and then ends here. So these 3 points get used to create the curve. So there's a keyboard shortcut for this. You can just hold down Control, select that middle control point. And it may be hard to see on screen. There's a little arc by the arrow of my cursor. It's going to generate a curve that uses those 3 points. So start here using that straight line segment, go through this point, then make this other straight line segment into the other half of that curve. Now my control here is a little bit different than what I had down below, whereas this was a handle to have on either end where it attaches to the next line segment. This is now one handle on it that passes through that control point. So as I twist it, if I can lengthen it on one side versus the other, then I have control over the shape and size and angle description of that path being used. And you can still always manipulate the placement of the individual control points passing through. And that works for any multiple point process. Polyline, polygon, poly length, area tool, even volume. That's the same as the area kind of function to get that baseline footprint to it. Different tool here as well. It's not used a lot because I've seen a lot of folks struggle with it. Is just the arc tool. So if you just use the basic arc, you'll pick a couple of points and just draws in kind of this quarter elliptical kind of shape. You can even see the bounding box that shows up here. It goes around it. It's just basically 1/4 of an ellipse. So if you draw a curve from the midpoint of all the sides, it'd make a full ellipse shape to it. This is just a quarter of that. So that can be sometimes problematic to have the right type of curve being drawn. It has this weird elliptical shape to it. We can still use shift in the same process. See, I'm holding down shift currently, so as I move, it becomes a constant radius arc. A different means for drawing in the arc is if you hold down Alt. So before you start picking, you press Alt, and then you generate a 3-point arc. So I'll pick down here first, and up here second. I'll pick my 3rd point over here on the right, and based on where I chose, it'll draw the arc between those points. And all you have to do for that one is just hold down Alt. Just reading through a couple of the questions that are here. As far as repeating, so as far as you want to keep on selecting the line button that comes in. It depends on what you have turned on for what's called the reuse function. So if you have the reuse enabled, you'll stay in the tool until you tell the software that you're done. So in my case, one of the common examples for that is line. So if I just hit L for line, without the reuse, you start it somewhere, you stop it, and you're out. The command is satisfied. You have both points defined for the line, and you're finished. To reissue it, then you pick line again. There's a couple ways to go about enabling this reuse function. On the status bar, I have mine turned on here at the very bottom. So it's way down here at the bottom. You got a handful of buttons and kind of the right-hand half of that. The icon here is the reuse toggle. So if it has that blue shading background to it, that function is enabled. So right now my reuse is turned on. If you're missing the status bar, you can go to your tools menu. The toolbars, the very first option off of that menu is status bar. If you're keyboard savvy, just F8 is the quick keyboard shortcut toggle to enable or disable the status bar display. A different option as well is on the toolbar. You can toggle it into the reuse by simply double clicking the tool. It's also one of the shortcuts here as well. You can just double tap on one of those functions. It'll transfer that into the reuse mode automatically. There may be some conditions where you don't want to have reused just on permanently. So you can just double tap like the line tool, draw your lines, and again, just press escape and then you're done. So just a real quick tip for a display function. This is something that I tend to have turned on all the time for me is disabling the line weights. You may get some PDFs that are supplied to you that have really thick lines being used, and they look great as far as printing on paper or whatnot. It comes across well. You have the proper line weights. It looks fantastic on paper. It may not be that useful within a digital version of that online here, so you can just simply disable the line weights. So I turned mine back on again, so I'm just kind of showing what's changing here. So these thicker lines I've got right here, I can come down here and I can choose my disable line weights. Now I have it located here on my display. You may not have it here on your current display. I'm using the Review Advanced profile. So it should be here by default within that profile. Otherwise, if you go into the View menu, at the very bottom of that is Disable Line Weights. So if you're not sure where it is in your current display, the icon's not showing for you, just go to your View menu, go all the way down, you have Disable Line Weights. So now you can see that the line work being displayed here is nice and thin being used on the plan, not really thick, bold lines. So let me show you what it looks like before. These thick lines, and then toggle it so my line widths are disabled. That's thin lines. That might give you better clarity to just the details being used in certain objects inside of the plan. Not this really wide, thick line widths inside of it. Just habit for me is I tend to have that line width disabled always turned on, so I don't have these thick lines being shown. Some other functions inside here too that can be very, very helpful to just expedite some of the processes that you're trying to understand. Say, for example, I don't know, the space inside of here, this little wedge shape that I have. I need to have that as an area measurement of that inside of here. So you can use the area tool and you can click your way around. It's a pretty common function. But one of the tools that you may not use a lot of, because you may not even be aware it's there or just not really sure how to use it, is called dynamic fill. So it shows up at the very end of your measurements toolbar, or if you are in the measurement panel, it'll be here on the end of it as well. Now, if you have your measurement panel kind of reduced in width, you may have to go to this little drop down arrow to see those. It's hanging out over here. But either place to go to, you have access to it. So what shows up when you enable that tool is a new toolbar. There's two main pieces that make this up. There's a define portion and then a create portion. So what define just means is to define the region that you want to do something with. And then the create is, what is that something that you want to do? If you want to just outline that with a polyline, or you got certain shading that means certain things inside of the process. You want to highlight to be green means this, and orange means something else. You can put those phases inside of there, what have you. Or it could be for certain measurement tools that you want to leverage with an area measurement or a polylength, perimeter, volume. You can choose one of those functions here. So in my case, the define side, this little kind of half-turned bucket is the fill. The way it works, you go inside of the space that you're trying to fill. Think of where you might place a hatch pattern inside of some defined region. You'd click inside of there. In this case, you would press and hold. It'll go through and then stop at the nearest solid continuous line for it to stop and be adjacent to. They'll just flood inside of that space. And see mine kind of jumped out of there. If you hold too long and it bleeds out too far, you may be a little too aggressive with how much it's going to be applied inside of there. So this is one of those, not really an art form, but it takes some practice to get used to the speed and how fast it fills and just how aggressive it's going to be with it. I'm going to just clear mine out. I'll go through a little bit slower so we can follow along with it. And just press and hold. It comes in here and just fills these areas in that I'm trying to understand. Even the curve, it'll go through and fill around that curve for me as well. And what might be happening here is there may be some kind of an opening or a void. You can see here, this was a dashed line. It'll bleed right through anything that's not a continuous line. So I may just happen to grab the wrong spot, or the integrity here is not that fantastic, but I'm sure you can get the idea. I'm going to go and grab this to fill that in. So I want to have that space understood. It can be as big or as small as you have to have that take on. And what do you want to have created from that information? That's the create side of this. So if you want just to outline it, I can grab a polygon option. I can grab the area, polylength, and any one of these handful of tools, or multiple. And see, I actually have both the polygon and the area chosen. So I can create both those objects from that region on the plan. But just for a better example, let me find a better sheet to show you this with. I'm going to come into here and say, sure, that location. I want to figure out maybe how much shoreline is being used for this, the river edge that's inside of here. Just fill that in. Go through. I don't want to miss that, so I'll make sure I fill that in. Zoom in here so you can see it better. So that's the portion I want to do something with. I want an area measurement from that. Now in this tool, little arrows I got here, this will go back and look at my tool chest to see if you have existing tools defined in that can be leveraged for whatever function I'm trying to accomplish. In my case, I chose the area measurement. So if I already have area measurement tools defined for doing this step in there, I want to have shoreline or whatever name that you have assigned to that, use that for me. You grab just the default properties. It's the same as using the area tool off the toolbar. I'm just going to apply it. So it drops that inside of here. So now I have that area measurement going around this really twisty, curvy, kind of contour shape being used for that river's edge. That's quick and easy. Doing that by hand, you can see all these control points in here. It's kind of the same as you going around and trying to trace it by hand, but it's doing click, 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 click as you work your way around that perimeter profile. You can do it by hand if you want, but this is available to go through and help expedite that process, or at least kind of more organic, obscure shapes inside of it. Now, a different tip with this too, with the area, or really any piece of text information that you want to move, that number shows up in a spot that really isn't convenient for how I wanted to read it on the plan. It'd be nice if it was maybe centered better up here instead. So on this, I want to move just the text, not the entire area measurement markup. So if you hold down Shift, I can then left click and hold and drag the text to some place that's just more useful to have that text displayed. You can do that with a lot of the measurement tools inside here. If the value just shows up in just not a convenient spot for it to be in, just shift and drag to manipulate just that portion you're trying to then adjust. Some different tips inside of here too. Different tools that you may or may not use with this. One that you probably have used in the past is a function here called snapshot. It's a way to go through and take some data and capture it to your Windows clipboard, then give you the opportunity then to paste that information anywhere you want into the PDF or any other destination location. I mean, if you wanted to capture some content out of here and paste it into a new RFI document, into an email being sent out, or a Word doc that you're trying to kind of create and submit back to someone. So you can use the snapshot tool just on the edit menu, about 2/3 of the way down. Snapshot keyboard shortcut for that is G. So you can then capture a portion. So if I want to go through and capture, I don't know, this little section here, everything I have inside of that little blue rectangular profile, that outline of that, is now copied to my Windows clipboard. I can paste that anywhere I need to. Email, PowerPoint, Word doc, into this PDF, a new PDF, put it where you need to. Just for showing it, I want to go and just right click and choose paste and have that same data then right here. Now, just that pasting step, you might have a reason to pull some data from sheet 1 and drop it in the exact same spot on sheet 2. So you can actually paste into the same coordinate location it was pulled from on a different sheet. So for example, I go over to this page here, whole different layout, different part of the city layout to it. If I do a Control Shift V, it drops that in the exact same spot it was copied from on the other page. Then that could be key if you're trying to make sure you line stuff up from page 1 to 2 to 3, whatever you're going between. Paste it into the same location it was copied from. We'll just Control Shift V. We'll just paste in place. Now, other options you got access to as well as any PDF that you have. If it's something that you make new PDFs from, so it should be a template. A lot of folks will go through and they'll open up some other, like a form is a very common thing to have for this. They'll open up a form they filled out for a job from last week. They'll open that, edit all the values and fields and save it as a new file, just so you don't overwrite the one you open up from. You can just take the file you have and just simply save it as a template. So for example, I'm going to make myself a new file from a template. I'll just use the R file one here. So if this is the current one that you build from, it has your logo in the corner, all that kind of good stuff is in it. But your workflow today is to open up one you had from last week that you then manipulate and save as. You can take this document here, and on that same menu where I said new from template, there's the option here is save as template. So any PDF that you're trying to begin new with, but you want to have all these values, all this structure to it predefined, make it a template. You're not just making new and trying to insert and combine and somehow get what you want in there. Make it your template. This makes the process of making a new file easier for you. So as you make a new one, like mine here, I based it from that template. It's just the default name of document one. It's not the name of the file I opened up from last week. I'm trying to modify for a new condition. It's a new file. So I won't accidentally overwrite some other file I had from last week. And one of the last things I want to hit on, get down to my last few minutes here to show, is one of the functions of the software that a lot of folks forget is even available is a 3D PDF. You can make a 3D PDF as long as you have Bluebeam Revu CAD or Extreme. So you can make a 3D PDF, say from Revit or from Navisworks, what have you. There's various packages that have plugins that you can make a 3D PDF from. So once you have a 3D PDF created, you don't have to have CAD or Extreme to look at it. You just got to have that version to create it. So now I have, this is a 3D model that came from Revit. It was just printed out as a 3D PDF. So now I can rotate, zoom in and zoom out. If need be, you can choose to cut a section line through this. So here's a section cutting through. I can change that so I can go higher or lower with that cut line being drawn through this. Change the angle of it inside of here. Even going so far as just to turn content off. So if I want to show the whole thing with, I don't know, the whole front wall here disabled, I can then choose to hide that part, and now it shows that same thing. Let's grab the wrong file here in accident. Without that turned on. So show, without the roof of the building, so you can see the contents inside, or drop the section through to see the contents inside. Ways that you can go through and just interact and work on that file. Now a 3D PDF, you're limited a bit as to what you can do in this. I can't measure from, say, this corner of the building to that one to figure out how long that would be. That's something you might do with just the plan views you'd be given from the architect to look at the sizes of buildings, what have you. But you can still add some markups inside of it. If I were to go through and put in a cloud or whatnot, or call out to this, I can point to an area, drop in some cloud. So what that makes is basically a little snapshot view of the model at that orientation. So what shows up now is I have a markup view here, which shows the markup. I can go back to my default view and I can rotate and spin and move it around as I need to. But I can always get back to that markup view to go back and see my markup at that stage. You can see that content being displayed up there. I've got my markup indicators turned off, but you can grab those to go right back into that too. So you might have these little spheres that are popping around on the 3D PDF. However you have the orientation set up as you apply your markups. You can just grab those spheres then to jump into that markup view. Or just go into your other views that you got here. In the markups list down below, there is an entire portion that's dedicated to the 3D PDF, so 3D model tree. So all of the parts, all the pieces that make up that 3D PDF, they're listed here. So you want to go through and find all the casework, the doors, the windows, whatnot, the walls inside of here. However, they're named from Revit, being produced from there into here, all that content carries forward. The 10 most used columns, the fields inside of here being pulled from the Revit model for the family data being used there. That can be turned off and modified and changed from here too. that's a way to go through and get some interaction with the model. I know I've kind of fire hosed a ton of stuff at you in just a few minutes. We're about done. I'll see if I can't do any quick questions here. Quick, there's a big laundry list inside here. There's a bunch posted, so thank you for that. Questions are always good. I know I'm not gonna have a chance to get to all these in the next couple of minutes that I got, but some great questions out here. A lot of these actually require a nice, good, probably written up response for everyone to go through and see. I think what I'll do with a lot of these is you just type it up in a spreadsheet form. Everybody has answers to it. And one of the questions that came up too is like drawing some content to a certain size and trying to draw a line to a length, trying to draw a circle to a certain radius kind of size, sketching to a certain size, not just arbitrarily drawing in a circle or a line at some random size. So what you can do in this, that there is an option here for sketch to scale. So if you want to draw something that's supposed to be, the length of this line is going to be 227 feet long, whatever it is. But you want to draw it so it's the appropriate size inside of the plan that you have. The key for this with all these tools here for the sketch to scale is that you first want to have the scale set in the plan, in the sheet. You can see in my case, the one here, my current scales, it's not set yet. So I can set mine, I'll say this one's supposed to be 1 to 200. So I'll just set that on my list. So in my sketch to scale, if I draw in just a polyline, I'm going to draw a line that goes to the right a certain distance. Since I'm drawing it to a scale, it'll then interpret how long it is on the sheet. What scale is that I assigned to it, give me what the overall length will then mathematically come out to be. So when I have this be 200 feet long or what have you, I can type that in, press enter, and now that segment has been drawn to 200 feet. So same thing for all those tools, be it a polygon, polyline, whatnot, with the sketch to scale. Just make sure you have the scale set first before you try those tools. I'll hop back over to my PowerPoint quick, and I zip right back. So some of the Q&A, I only got a minute or two left here. So again, I'm going to type this all up as far as the answers to your questions. Just some fantastic questions inside of here. And you will get a link to all those to see all the answers to the questions. If you've got more questions that are beyond the video, you want to see something that's more personalized for you and how the software can benefit you, just let us know. Reach out. I'm happy to go through it and via email or talk to you about what the processes can be to improve what you have in the workflows you have in house. See a demo for your team that's personalized to you guys. Just let us know. Happy to help out as best we can. So thank you. Appreciate everyone's time today. If you have questions, feel free to hang out and type them into the Q&A panel here so we get all that kind of captured before we end the session. Because once we end it, you're all going to be kicked out of there. I'm going to wrap it up so no more questions can be answered at that point. So thank you all. Appreciate your time. That'll wrap it up for today.